each instrument really occupies its own space, the type of bandwidth that I've never heard before. Now that I've had a few weeks of living with the Prodigio WR1 full-range 6-foot-tall electrostatic speaker with no crossover, keep watching to hear my initial listening impressions of these incredible speakers. The sound that I heard live at the Met Opera was very, very similar in many respects to what I'm hearing here with the Prodigio WR1s. You may be asking yourself, why did I choose these particular speakers? There are just so many brands and models and types of speakers on the market. I mean, the choices are almost endless. And of course, as I mentioned, I had what I feel are one of the best box speakers on the market, the TAD CR1, designed by Andrew Jones. And so what tempted me to get much, much larger speakers in? One of the things that really tipped over the top for me is that they were described as a modern day Soundlab. And Soundlabs are speakers that I'd heard at a friend's house many, many years ago and many times. And I just thought that they were just one of the best sound experiences that I'd ever heard. But of course, Soundlabs are very, very large and they're almost like room dividers. And I really couldn't commit that much space to having them because this is a multi-purpose room. Behind the speakers is a large projection screen that I also use as room for home theater. So it has to do a lot of different functions, and massive speakers are just not necessarily the right choice for me. And these are about the largest size speakers that I think I would be willing to go. One of the things that, again, really attracted me to the speaker was the fact that it has no crossover. And very interesting thing, I had heard the Alsyvox ribbon speakers, and I just really fell in love with them. I just thought that they were really phenomenal. Again, very, very expensive. I think their entry-level models are like $90,000 or something like that. And the interesting thing about the Alsyvox is that they offer two different crossover choices. One, the standard crossover, and the other, an external, much larger crossover for, I think, about an additional cost of about $40,000 in some of the models. And what I've read on the forums is that people said that the additional crossover with much higher quality components sounds significantly better. So the interesting thing is the Prodigio that has no crossover in the main panel itself, that eliminates a lot of the circuitry in the signal. And so what I'm hearing is a purity of sound that I've not heard before. And it's not like I'm hearing just some additional details or resolution in the recordings. No, it's just a completely different ballgame. To use a Star Trek analogy for people that follow that series, the holodeck, where you're experiencing an event, you're actually in the event itself. Well, that is what I liken this experience to. And the other thing is that each instrument really occupies its own space. And also, it has just so much bandwidth, the type of bandwidth that I've never heard before. The singer, you get their entire body. A violin is not just the string sound. You get the entire image of a person playing violin in front of you. In piano recordings, listening to Bill Evans' Sunday at the Village Vanguard and many of his other recordings as well, man, I've never had an experience like this before where you really feel like Bill is in front of you playing. You get the soundboard. You get the striking of the hammers on the strings. You get the performer. You just hear something that is much more akin to being at the original experience. And the other aspect of these speakers is being a dipole line source. And essentially what that does is that helps erase your room from the equation. To the side of the speaker, kind of where I'm sitting now, is a null. So I used to have these room treatments on the side, absorbing the first reflection points. And with these speakers, I don't really need to do that because the sound is directed to you and not to the sides. And also the sound that's coming out of the back of the speaker really bounces around the room, and it just gives you that live feeling in a way that just a lot of other box speakers that are more of a cardioid pattern just do not give you. In some of the recordings that I use as tests, I'll use very, very small cues in the recording that are easy to remember, because the truth of the matter is that most of us don't have very good aural memories. It's hard for us to memorize what something sounds like. And very complex sounds are even harder to memorize because there's just a lot going on. But when you focus on one particular element, be it a kettle drum or a bass drum, as a matter of fact, I was just recently at the Met Opera here in New York City seeing an incredible opera, Turandot, and I was up in the balcony, which is actually a fairly good place sonically. And the interesting thing is that I would close my eyes at certain points in the performance and try and evaluate the sound that I was hearing, which is, of course, completely unamplified, and try and evaluate that like I would a stereo system. And the interesting thing is that the sound that I heard live at the Met Opera was very, very similar in many respects to what I'm hearing here with the Prodigio WR1s. And of course, it doesn't have the scale and the dynamic range of a full 80-piece live orchestra, but one of the really, really amazing things that these speakers do are the sound of drum skins and drum hits resonating. And because the membrane is actually lighter than the air surrounding it, it's essentially a massless design, and it can just react so quickly, and you hear that in the strike of a kettle drum or a timpani or a bass drum, and it just has that kind of resonance that you just don't hear with other speakers. In the great Sufjan Stevens album, Illinois, on track number 2, it starts with a multiple drum sound that builds, and I have never heard that in such a way. I mean, with the TADs, they were fantastic and they were definitely very, very audible, but it was just like kind of like a smaller drum sound that would kind of build and emanate. But with these, man, you were just much more surrounded by the drums, and you heard each drum much more distinctly, and you heard the individual resonances of the heads. It's just a tremendous, tremendous experience. And again, as I said, having no crossover in the main panel just gives you a purity of sound that I have not experienced before.